there, I'm Liz Lewis and I'm an artist and designer living and working in London. For this illustration I'm using gouache and watercolour, flat-headed and round watercolour brushes, a fine pencil and a permanent black ink pen. I've taped down a fairly thick piece of paper using masking tape. The paper will initially buckle due to the watery paint, but once dried it will revert to a flat sheet. With the pencil I'm loosely marking out the gull's position to the right of the paper to give a sense of it standing on the rocks, looking out to sea. Imagine the bird as shapes: a small oval for the head, and then a larger oval for the body, and do the same with the tail, legs, and beak using rectangle shapes. I'm now drawing the gull's outline in more detail using a fine pencil, and I'm doing the same for the rocks. In the palette, I'm using ocean blue, neutral grey, and warm grey, adding to water to make a thin wash, which I'm going to use for the sea. Test the shade on a piece of scrap paper first before you apply it to the drawing. I'm using a flat brush to apply the wash as it creates a nice texture. I'm painting very carefully around the areas of the gull that I want to remain white. You can use a more concentrated version of this wash to apply the gull's shadow under its head and the body. Apply the paint lightly. You can always add more. It's much harder to subtract gouache because of its opacity. I penciled in the edge of the wing and given it a little flourish. I've added a touch of black ivory paint to the blue-grey mix. Remember, you don't have to go in hard. Start off with a diluted wash. You can always build it up. I'm going to add some colour to the beak and legs. I'm using an orange yellow for underneath the beak and a lighter shade for the top, and I'm going to leave a small area paint free for the highlight. You'll notice that I've refined the shape of the beak to make it more lifelike, and I've added a bit more detail. I'm mixing some of the sea grey wash with a touch of pinky red from the watercolour palette to paint the legs. Then I'm going to use the same pinky red for the gull's red beak marking. I'm applying dark grey paint onto the wing with the neutral and warm grey and a touch of black ivory for the darker areas. And I'm doing the same for the tail area to give the tail more definition. Using the fine black ink pen, I'm very carefully outlining some of the areas around the gull's head and body. And I'll also use the same pen to fill in the pupil. And so to the rocks. I've mixed up Van Dyke brown, warm grey and neutral grey with a lot of water to make the base colour. To make the dark rock shadows, I've added black to the mixture, and I'm using a scrap of paper to make sure the shade is right before applying. I'm using the tip of the brush and sides to emphasise facets and cracks of the rock face. I'm using green and blue in the watercolour palette to add plants growing and spilling out of the cracks in the rocks. I've mixed up a lovely olive green and brilliant yellow to show the different shades of coloration on the rock surface. And then a lighter version with more added yellow. After the paper has dried, I'm going to again emphasise the darker shadows so that the look and style match the gull. This is Prussian blue. Isn't it gorgeous? I'm using it to return to the sea again for the darker areas near to the rocks, and also to create a sense of depth. Prussian blue reminds me of my sister, as we have a mutual love for this colour, and painting the gull reminds me of the seaside town where I was an art student on my foundation course a few years ago. I'm painting the gull's face and body with white zinc gouache, blending on top of the darker shadow below. And then moving over to the white pattern of the gull's wing. I'm also adding touches of Prussian blue to the gull. This gives it an extra tonal quality and connects it more to the sea. I'm now going over the gull's face to add extra definition. I'm now adding zinc white to my sea background to give an indication of wave crests. The work is now complete. When you take the tape away, you can see it's left a nice crisp border.